Aha! You're here. Welcome, gentlemen.
You talking to us?
Of course.
How about that, Willis? Downtown 2 minutes and already we're gentlemen.
Remember when a white Park Avenue millionaire adopted 2 black kids from Harlem and created the most popular interracial family on television? Diff'rent Strokes premiered on NBC in 1978, ran for 8 seasons and 181 episodes, turning Gary Coleman into the highest paid actor on television at the time, launching a popular spinoff, and tackling some of the heaviest, very special episodes TV had ever seen. You know the cast: Gary Coleman as Arnold, Todd Bridges as Willis, Dana Plato as Kimberly, Conrad Bain as Mr. Drummond, and Charlotte Rae as Mrs. Garrett, holding that whole penthouse together. But there's a lot you probably don't know. The show it almost was, the real stories behind the scenes, the rumors, the money, and the stuff nobody talked about until years later. Today, we're breaking down 15 weird facts about Diff'rent Strokes. Now, before we jump in, hit like and subscribe to Remember When for more deep dives into the shows you grew up with, and share this with a friend who still hears that theme song in their head. Alright, let's get into the countdown with number 15, the show that almost had a totally different address. Before the Drummonds ever set foot in that Park Avenue penthouse, Diff'rent Strokes went through a full identity crisis. The show started because Norman Lear had a problem. 2 problems, actually. Conrad Bain had just wrapped a 6-year run on Maude and needed a new vehicle. Meanwhile, 10-year-old Gary Coleman had starred in a handful of unsold pilots that Lear produced trying to revive the Little Rascals. None of them went anywhere, but Lear saw something in the kid and wasn't about to let him go. Early versions of the show looked nothing like what eventually aired. One concept cast Bain as a private detective, with Coleman as his pint-sized informant. The idea was loosely inspired by Bulldog Drummond, a fictional pulp novel PI from the 1920s. The detective angle didn't last, but the last name did. Another pitch made Drummond a hard-nosed real estate developer who could only purchase a Harlem housing block if he agreed to take custody of the orphan living there. So basically, a kid was the closing cost on a real estate deal. Somehow, that version didn't survive either. The version that finally stuck carried the working title 45 Minutes from Harlem, which is funny considering the Upper East Side is about 10 minutes away by subway. At that stage, there was no Willis. NBC executives pushed for an older brother to balance the dynamic, and Todd Bridges was added straight off the canceled sitcom Fish. No audition required. Dana Plato landed the role of Kimberly after producer Al Burton spotted her on a cheerleading team during The Gong Show. And when Norman Lear wanted Charlotte Rae as Mrs. Garrett, he personally pried her out of her CBS contract to make it happen. A detective show, a real estate scheme, and a title that couldn't do basic math, there were a lot of wrong turns that happened before Diff'rent Strokes found its way to Park Avenue. Number 14, the animated afterlife nobody asked for. In 1982, Hanna-Barbera and NBC launched The Gary Coleman Show, and despite the cheerful title, it wasn't a variety show or a talk show. It was a cartoon spun off from the TV movie The Kid with the Broken Halo, where Coleman played Andy LeBeau, an apprentice angel who kept screwing up in heaven.
You didn't happen to bring a towel, did you?
As a last chance to earn his wings, Andy got sent to Earth to do good deeds in a little town called Oakville. Every episode, his efforts were sabotaged by Hornswoggle, a well-dressed demon with a goatee who only Andy could see. And Andy's heavenly supervisor, Angelica, well, she flat out refused to believe Hornswoggle even existed. Any evidence Andy brought her conveniently got destroyed. Now, behind the scenes, things were just as weird. Hanna-Barbera set up a Mexican animation studio specifically for this show because the production timeline was so tight. When the first batch of animation came back, Andy LeBeau had been drawn as a white kid. According to legend, the Mexican studio had never heard of Gary Coleman. Regardless, that got corrected in a hurry. The show lasted 1 season, 13 episodes, before NBC replaced it with Alvin and the Chipmunks. After bouncing around cable reruns for years, it somehow landed on Adult Swim in 2006, before eventually cycling off their schedule. One of the strangest relics of 80s Saturday morning television, and yes, it absolutely existed. Number 13, the twin trick most viewers never questioned.
I'll get it. Hello, Anna.
Conrad Bain had an identical twin brother named Boner. And if you didn't know that, you're not alone, most people didn't, which is exactly why this worked. In the 1983 season 6 episode, The Van Drummonds, written, by the way, by future Oscar-winning screenwriter Paul Haggis, the show introduced Philip Drummond's eccentric Dutch cousin, Anna von Drummond, played by Conrad, in full drag. Dana Plato also suited up in drag as Anna's son Hans. Conrad handled all the on-camera work, the dialogue, the close-ups, the whole performance. But whenever Philip and Anna needed to be in the exact same shot, Boner quickly stepped in, no camera tricks needed. And Conrad didn't phone it in. He worked with Lillian Glass, the same speech coach who prepped Dustin Hoffman for Tootsie, to nail a Dutch-accented female voice. Glass also coached Dana Plato on sounding like a Dutch boy. For a goofy sitcom episode, they really went all in. The end credits correctly list Conrad in the role, but here's where it gets messy. IMDb credits Boner. Getty Images captioned set photos as Boner, and since Boner had already played a fictional evil version of Conrad on SCTV, a character called Hank Bain, nobody could keep straight which twin did what anymore. Over 40 years later, that mix-up is still out there. The episode got it right, but the internet didn't. Number 12, Diff'rent Strokes borrowed from the Brady Bunch playbook.
This is better than anything I ever saw in the Brady Bunch.
Now, here's something most people never connected. Diff'rent Strokes quietly recycled storylines from the Brady Bunch, and it wasn't a coincidence. The link was Howard Leeds, a veteran sitcom writer and producer who served as executive producer and head writer on the Brady Bunch from 1970 to 1974, then moved over to Diff'rent Strokes when it launched in 1978. Leeds knew what worked in a family sitcom, and he wasn't shy about reworking Brady's scripts and storylines for the Drummonds' penthouse. Same structure, same moral lesson by the end credits formula, just with a different zip code and a very different set of life experiences. And once you know the connection, the parallels start jumping out. In 1973, Bobby and Peter Brady divide their shared bedroom with a strip of tape after a big falling out. Years later, Willis does the exact same thing to Arnold. The Brady Bunch did a smoking episode in 1971 called Where There's Smoke, where Greg experiments with cigarettes. Diff'rent Strokes did their own smoking episode in 1984 and called it Where There's Smoke.
You smoke?
Sure. Here you go, guys.
Fellas, I don't think you should do that here. I mean, you sure you want to smoke right now? I mean, here?
They didn't even bother changing the title. And when the original kid stars started aging out of their cuteness, both shows hit the same panic button. The Brady Bunch brought in Cousin Oliver in its final season, a move so infamous it became shorthand for a show running out of ideas. Diff'rent Strokes did the same thing, adding 8-year-old Sam McKinney, played by Danny Cooksey, when Gary Coleman started outgrowing the adorable kid routine. Different kid, same desperation. Number 11, the theme song that did all the heavy lifting.
Now the world don't move to the beat of just one drum.
That earworm you've been humming since 1978, it was doing a lot more work than you ever realized, and the voice you've been giving credit to, it's probably wrong.
For you, may not be right for some, man.
It Takes Diff'rent Strokes was written by Alan Thicke, his then-wife Gloria Loring, and Al Burton. Thicke, years before he became one of America's favorite sitcom dads on Growing Pains, was already Hollywood's go-to guy for TV theme songs. The man had over 40 to his credit, including Wheel of Fortune and The Joker's Wild. If you hummed a theme in the 1980s, there's a decent chance that Alan Thicke wrote it.
Different strokes it takes, different strokes to move the world.
But here's where it gets interesting. Most people assume Thicke sang lead on the Diff'rent Strokes theme. He didn't. Thicke sang the original demo and provided backing vocals, but the soulful lead you actually heard every week was performed by his writing partner, Al Burton. Thicke reportedly felt his voice didn't have the right sound for the final broadcast version.
Everybody's got a special kind of story.
Thicke once described the challenge of writing a TV theme. You had about 30 seconds to do something catchy, memorable, and sum up the entire premise of a show. For Diff'rent Strokes, they nailed it.
Different strokes to move the world.
Number 10, the show was Janet Jackson's sitcom layover. Before she took control of pop music, Janet Jackson was basically hiding in plain sight, protected by laugh tracks and studio lights.
My dad flipped when he saw it. He said I was too young to be going steady. He sort of forbid me to see you anymore.
What did he say?
I forbid you to see him anymore.
By the late 70s, Janet was already a familiar TV face. She'd made a serious impression as Penny on Good Times, but it was Diff'rent Strokes where she quietly stuck around. She first showed up in 1980 as Charlene Dupre, Willis's girlfriend, just 14 years old. She wasn't a series regular, but she popped up in about 10 episodes over 4 years, which was just enough to keep her visible without overexposing her. There's a fun behind-the-scenes story about how she got the role. Todd Bridges has said he recommended Janet to the producers after seeing her around the studio. The dramatic hire her or I quit version, that's probably been punched up over time, but yes, Bridges helped get her in the door, and the on-screen romance spilled off screen. Bridges has said that the two dated briefly as teenagers. Puppy love under a microscope. Dating a Jackson meant meeting the brothers, which is a lot to process when you're still worrying about your algebra homework. Now, here's the irony. The future pop powerhouse was least comfortable doing the thing everyone assumed would be automatic, which is singing on a sitcom. In a 1982 episode called The Music Man, Charlene performs The Magic Is Working from Janet's self-titled debut album. It plays cute in reruns, but Janet has said in interviews that those moments felt stiff and artificial to her. She wasn't interested in being a sitcom singer. By 1984, the arrangement had run its course. Charlene faded out quietly, no big goodbye, and not long after, Janet linked up with Jimmy Jam and Terry Lewis. Those sessions became Control, the moment she stopped being Janet Jackson from TV and started being Janet Jackson, period. Number 9, Gary Coleman's Miniature Empire. It turns out Arnold Jackson's love of model trains came straight from Gary Coleman himself. For Coleman, model railroading was a hobby and a sanctuary. At the height of his fame, Coleman built sprawling model railroad layouts in his homes, spending thousands of dollars on custom track work, hand-built landscapes, and painstakingly accurate scenery. Inside those train rooms, Gary was the conductor, in total control, a sharp contrast to a television set where directors, producers, and even parents called every shot. The obsession ran deep enough that it bled onto the show itself. Fans of the show may remember Arnold tinkering with model layouts in the background of various penthouse scenes. Unlike most child actors handed a toy for set dressing, Coleman actually knew what he was doing. He was a hardcore Denver and Rio Grande Western Railroad enthusiast, obsessed with prototypical accuracy. He didn't just collect, he worked part-time at Caboose Hobbies in Denver just to be near the equipment. Multiple people who visited the store remember him behind the counter, deeply knowledgeable and very serious about his trains. In September of 1990, Coleman appeared on the cover of Railroad Model Craftsman magazine, showcasing his Rio Grande layouts. In a world that constantly reduced him to a catchphrase, that cover meant something. Number 8, the rumor that followed Gary Coleman everywhere. Here's something people forget about Gary Coleman. He was 10 years old with the comedic timing of someone 3 times his age. He could land a joke and handle last-minute rewrites better than most of the adults around him. Critics compared his delivery to Jack Benny and Groucho Marx, and instead of just accepting that he was a gifted kid, Hollywood got suspicious. A rumor started circulating that NBC hadn't actually hired a child at all. The theory was that Coleman was a professional adult performer with dwarfism disguised as a kid to pull off the ultimate ratings trick. Rather than believe the kid was talented, people decided it made more sense that an entire television network was running an elaborate con. Coleman's medical condition made the rumor stick. His congenital kidney disease and the treatments for it kept his appearance younger than his age, even as his timing and discipline suggested someone far older. To people who didn't understand the condition, the math didn't add up. By the time he was 12, tabloids ran with it. Late-night hosts joked about it, and kids repeated it on playgrounds like fact instead of fiction. It got loud enough that Gary's parents, Willie and Edmonia Sue, had to go on record in interviews confirming again and again that yes, this was their child, and yes, he was an actual kid. Imagine having to prove your son exists because he's too good at his job. Gary handled it with sarcasm. On talk shows, he mocked the whole idea with the same deadpan timing that helped create the rumor in the first place. Okay, we're halfway through this video, so we're going to take a quick pause because I need to know which Diff'rent Strokes moment is burned into your brain the most. Let us know in the comment section below, and hey, while you're down there, hit that like button and subscribe so you don't miss our next trip back down retro TV lane. Alright, let's get back into the countdown with number 7, the hate mail nobody talks about. Diff'rent Strokes was a top 10 hit. Millions of people tuned in every week to watch a wealthy white man raise 2 black kids from Harlem and love them like his own. Most of the country thought it was groundbreaking. Some of the country thought it was unforgivable. After the show premiered, Conrad Bain, television's gentlest billionaire, started receiving threatening letters from the Ku Klux Klan. At least one came from a self-identified Grand Dragon, furious over what he saw as the promotion of race mixing on national television.
Hey, it's Mr. Darcy. Remember him, Arnold?
Yeah, he's our old slumlord.
Todd Bridges had it even worse, and it showed up in his daily life. Bridges has spoken openly in interviews and in his memoir Killing Willis about the racism he faced as a black teenager living in the San Fernando Valley during the show's run. He was pulled over by the same officers daily for 2 years. He was called the N-word, he was once arrested for stealing his own car, and he filed a police harassment lawsuit in 1993, and it only made things worse. And then there was the Klan. Bridges has confirmed that self-identified Klan members harassed him directly, including stealing his Porsche, dousing it in gasoline, and setting it on fire. This kid was going to work every day delivering punchlines and getting laughs in front of a live studio audience, and then going home to a neighborhood where people wanted to burn him out of it. In his own words, the set was actually a safety zone compared to what was waiting for him off camera. 2 black kids being loved by a white father on primetime television. For millions of families, it was appointment viewing, but for some, it was the most offensive thing on TV. Number 6, Dana Plato and the Paris Excuse. Now here's where the Diff'rent Strokes fantasy cracked right down the middle. In 1984, Dana Plato, who played Kimberly Drummond since the show's debut, got pregnant at 19. She'd moved in with her boyfriend, rock guitarist Lanny Lambert, and the two married that April. Their son Tyler was born in July. In another show, maybe that becomes a storyline, but this was 1980s network television where an unwed pregnant character on a family sitcom was basically a 5-alarm fire in the executive suite. Producers decided Plato's pregnancy, combined with emerging substance abuse problems that were becoming harder to ignore, didn't fit the squeaky clean image they'd built. So they did what sitcoms do best when they don't know how to deal with reality. They shipped Kimberly off to study in Paris. That's it. 6 years as a series regular, and her exit strategy was a one-line excuse. Where's Kimberly? Oh, she's in Paris, studying, very busy. Now, to be fair, Plato wasn't completely erased. She came back for guest appearances during the show's final 2 seasons, but the damage was done. She'd lost her regular role, her steady paycheck, and the only professional structure she'd known since childhood. What followed was a slow unraveling that became tabloid ammunition for years. Plato struggled to land roles that didn't box her into the girl next door image. She posed for Playboy in 1989, hoping to reboot her career, but it backfired. By 1990, she was living in Las Vegas and working as a cashier at a dry cleaner. This was someone who'd been earning $25,000 an episode just a few years earlier. Dana Plato died on May 8th of 1999. She was 34 years old. The show that was built on the idea that family means acceptance had written out its own daughter the moment her life stopped fitting the brand. And that contradiction followed Dana Plato a lot longer than any residual check ever did. Number 5, the $18 million that vanished. At the height of Diff'rent Strokes, Gary Coleman was basically holding NBC together with both his hands.
Who's that? I hope it's not the Gestapo.
Hi, kids.
It is.
His face anchored the lineup. His catchphrase entered the national vocabulary. His image was plastered across lunchboxes, board games, and t-shirts, and by the early 80s, he was pulling in $100,000 per episode. That made him one of the highest paid actors on television. Not child actors, actors, period. Over the course of the series, Coleman generated an estimated $18 million. That's a staggering amount of money for anyone, let alone a kid who still needed someone to drive him to work. But here's where it got ugly. Behind the scenes, Coleman was working long, punishing hours despite being a minor with serious health complications. Todd Bridges wrote in his memoir Killing Willis that the physical strain and constant pressure left Coleman increasingly depressed and withdrawn from the cast. His parents had him back at work 2 weeks after a kidney transplant. His body rejected the kidney, but the checks kept clearing, so the show kept rolling. When Diff'rent Strokes finally ended in 1986, Coleman was 18 years old. He went to access his trust fund, the one that should have been worth millions, and found $220,000. His parents, Willie and Edmonia Sue, had written themselves into his contract as paid employees of Gary Coleman Productions, a company set up when Gary was 10 years old. By the time anyone with Gary's actual interests in mind looked at the books, the money was gone. In 1989, at 21 years old, Coleman sued his adoptive parents and former business advisor for $3.8 million, alleging misappropriation of his trust fund. After a brutal legal battle, a judge ruled in his favor in 1993 and awarded him $1.28 million, which may sound like justice until you remember that's about 7 cents on the dollar of what he had actually earned. By 1999, the former highest paid child actor on television filed for bankruptcy. Not long after, he took a job as a security guard. The kid who once earned more per episode than most Americans make in a year was now working the front desk just to keep the lights on. On May 28th of 2010, Gary Coleman passed away. He was 42. The kid who earned $18 million never saw most of it. Number 4, the line that made him and trapped him.
What you talking about, Willis?
5 words. That's all it took to define and eventually cage an entire career. In the pilot episode Moving In, the script called for a perfectly clean line. What are you talking about, Willis? Grammatically correct, completely forgettable, but Gary Coleman, all 10 years and 4 feet of him, changed the delivery. He tightened it, sped it up, and gave it attitude. What came out was, "What you talking about, Willis?" And the studio audience lost it.
What you talking about, Willis?
Nobody planned this. The line was never intended to become a catchphrase, but after the audience reaction in the premiere, the writer started building it into episode after episode. He tossed it around to whomever was in the room.
What you talking about, Mr. D? What you talking about, Kimberly? What you talking about, Mr. D?
One guy with a lot of time on his hands actually sat down and counted. Arnold said that phrase a whopping 116 times across the entire series, and it followed him off the set too. Fans asked him to say it at restaurants, gas stations, airports. Strangers shouted it at him from across the street. By the later seasons, Coleman was openly refusing to deliver the line on camera. By season 8, it was gone entirely, not because the writers retired it, but because Coleman wouldn't say it anymore. Here's the thing that makes the whole story sting. The line only worked because Coleman was genuinely talented. A 10-year-old kid heard a flat sentence and instinctively knew how to make it land. That's not luck, that's craft, but nobody remembers the craft. They just remember the catchphrase, and unfortunately, Coleman spent the rest of his life trying to escape it. Number 3, the illusion that built the show and broke the star. Now, here's the thing nobody talks about when they remember Diff'rent Strokes. The thing that made Gary Coleman a star was the same thing that was slowly breaking him down.
Say, baby. Say hello to Mr. J.
Gary Coleman was born with, and I'm going to apologize for saying this wrong in advance, focal segmental glomerulosclerosis, a severe kidney disease that required a transplant when he was just 5 years old. The immunosuppressant drugs that kept him alive after the surgery also stunted his growth permanently and kept his face round and childlike well into adulthood. He would never grow past 4 feet 8 inches tall. That gap between how old Gary looked and how sharp Gary actually was became the engine of the entire show. But by season 7, Coleman was 16. His voice had dropped, his patience was gone, and the script still had him playing adorable little Arnold. When Joan Rivers asked on The Tonight Show in 1985 if the show was maturing his character, he basically said no, and yeah, he was annoyed about it. Meanwhile, Todd Bridges was visibly growing up right next to him, making the freeze even harder to ignore. Coleman later admitted he'd been bored and disinterested for the last 3 or 4 years of the show, that he was jealous of kids who got to have a normal childhood. The disease that nearly killed him is the same thing that made him a star, and the stardom that followed made it impossible for anyone, the network, the producers, even his own parents, to let him grow up. Number 2, the backdoor pilot that launched a second hit. The creation of The Facts of Life wasn't a victory lap. It was a calculated risk, and for a while it looked like one that might not pay off. The experiment began during season 1 of Diff'rent Strokes with the episode The Girls' School. The episode was a backdoor pilot, quietly testing whether Charlotte Rae could anchor a new ensemble on her own. Rae herself had proposed the spin-off idea, but seeing the potential and betting your career on it are two very different things. She'd just come out of a divorce after 25 years of marriage, and walking away from a guaranteed paycheck on a hit show terrified her. So she negotiated a contractual escape hatch. If the Facts of Life tanked in its first season, she could return to Diff'rent Strokes and resume her role as housekeeper, no questions asked. And for a minute, that clause looked like it might get used. The first season ranked 74th in the ratings, barely inside the range of survival. NBC responded with a major retool. The original ensemble of 7 girls got trimmed down to 4. New writers came in and the whole tone sharpened. The gamble worked. The Facts of Life found its footing, ran for 9 seasons and 201 episodes. By its 3rd season, it was NBC's #1 comedy, outperforming the very show it spun off from. Number 1, the very special episode that scarred a generation. In 1983, Diff'rent Strokes dropped one of the most disturbing very special episodes ever. Season 5's episodes 16 and 17, The Bicycle Man. You knew something was different from the opening seconds. Before a single joke landed, Conrad Bain stepped out of character.
We urge families, children and parents alike, to watch this informative episode and then discuss the problem presented, which is of deep concern to all of us.
It started innocent enough. Arnold and Dudley had befriended Mr. Horton, the friendly owner of a neighborhood bike shop, played by Gordon Jump. First came free bike repairs and banana splits in his back apartment, then pizza and wine, then pornographic magazines, shirtless Tarzan photo sessions, and adult cartoons. Here's the part that still gives people chills. The laugh track kept rolling throughout. Jokes about cartoons and pizza got canned laughter, even as every kid watching sat frozen on their couch, realizing something very wrong was happening. That clash between the laughs and the horror is what made the episode unforgettable and deeply unsettling. And here's what made the ending so terrifying. Arnold got out. He got uncomfortable enough to leave, but Dudley stayed behind. By the time Arnold confessed everything to Mr. Drummond and the police arrived at the shop, Horton had already given Dudley a pill and was moments away from assaulting him. Arnold escaped. His best friend almost didn't. What makes the episode even harder to watch now is knowing what was happening behind the scenes. Todd Bridges later revealed he'd been abused multiple times by his own publicist during his time on the show. He called filming The Bicycle Man a very hard week. And Shavar Ross, who played Dudley, revealed in 2006 that while they were taping the episode, he was going through a similar experience in real life, being inappropriately touched by a family friend while he was asleep. That real-world pain gives the whole thing a weight that only gets heavier with time. And then there's Gordon Jump. In 1983, audiences knew him as the lovable, bumbling station manager Arthur Carlson from WKRP in Cincinnati. He'd later become the lonely Maytag repairman. Watching one of TV's most harmless, likable actors play a predator was part of the point, and part of what made it so effective. The Bicycle Man became the blueprint for every very special episode that followed. It topped Mental Floss's list of the best very special episodes ever made, and for every kid who watched it, the world looked a little different afterward. There was no going back after that one. And there you have it, 15 weird facts about Diff'rent Strokes. Which one surprised you the most, and what did we miss that you still remember from watching this show live or in reruns? Drop your memories in the comment section below because we read them because you're our people. If this stirred up some 70s and 80s sitcom nostalgia, hit like, subscribe for more deep dives into the shows we grew up on, and share this video with someone who used to race to the TV the second they heard that Diff'rent Strokes theme kick in. Until next time, what you talking about, Willis? This is Remember When.